Do you think you know the Old West? Hollywood spent decades showing good guys versus bad guys, simple stories with a happy ending. But the records tell a different story. There are cases historians avoid, photos that disappeared from museums, deaths no one could explain. The real West had secrets that didn't fit into the movies. These are 23 mysteries that will change everything you thought you knew. Subscribe to our channel and leave a comment on the video if you already knew about any of them. Number 1. In Arizona's Superstition Mountains, there's a story that makes sensible men lose their minds. Jacob Waltz, a German immigrant, Americans called the Dutchman, would show up in Phoenix in the 1880s with nuggets of pure gold. He never said where he found them. When he died in 1891, he whispered vague instructions to a neighbor. What came next is disturbing. More than 600 people have died looking for that mine, some from thirst, others from falls, many simply vanished. Rescue teams have found bodies mummified by the desert, some with their eyes torn out by vultures. The Apache always warned, those mountains are guarding something that doesn't want to be found. Maps still turn up at auctions today, sold for fortunes. None has led anyone to the gold. But every year, new hunters show up in Arizona, convinced they'll be different. Number 2. In 1881, Sheriff Pat Garrett said he killed Billy the Kid in a dark room in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. But the story doesn't really add up. The body was buried in a hurry. No photo, no autopsy. Even back then, witnesses disagreed about who was actually in that coffin. Then comes the crazy part. In 1950, an old man named Brushy Bill Roberts showed up in Texas swearing he was Billy. The guy had bullet scars in the right places and knew details only someone on the inside would know. He asked the governor of New Mexico for a pardon, and the governor refused. Roberts died months later, taking the truth to the grave. Garrett got fame and a reward out of that death. Did he have a reason to lie? Attempts to exhume the body for a DNA test have been blocked several times. Why are people so afraid to find out the truth after all this time? Number 3, Jesse James's Lost Gold, Missouri, 1880s. Everybody knows Jesse James as the outlaw who robbed banks and trains. But here's what not many people know. When he died in 1882, nobody found a single cent of the stolen money. We're talking entire fortunes that just vanished. The most accepted theory? James buried it all in caves, scattered across Missouri and Oklahoma. The problem is, he left coded clues that nobody has been able to fully crack. To this day, treasure hunters show up in those areas with metal detectors and old maps. Some have found elaborate tunnels. Others never came back. Local authorities have lost count of how many people have been hurt, or worse, exploring those unstable caves. Is the gold real, or did James spend it all before he died? That question is literally worth millions. Number 4, she showed up out of nowhere and disappeared like smoke. Etta Place appeared alongside the Sundance Kid around 1900, traveled with him and Butch Cassidy through South America, and then just vanished from history. No one knows her real name, where she came from, or what happened to her. Some researchers think she was a school teacher from Texas. Others swear she worked in a brothel. Some people push an even wilder theory, that she was a government informant. The fact is, in 1906, she came back to the United States alone and was never seen with the gang again. When Butch and Sundance supposedly died in Bolivia in 1908, Etta was already gone. Investigators spent decades trying to track down what happened to her. Some leads point to San Francisco, others to Argentina. To this day, none have been confirmed. Number 5. The Mountain Meadows Massacre. In September 1857, a wagon train with 120 people was crossing Utah on the way to California. These were entire families looking for a new life out west. None of them would make it to their destination. For 5 days, the group was surrounded and attacked. When they finally surrendered, believing they'd be safely escorted, they were executed in cold blood. Men, women, and teenagers fell right there. Only 17 children too young to be witnesses were spared. For decades, local native tribes were blamed, but the truth was different. Mormon militiamen, some dressed as natives, carried out the attack. The mood was paranoid, since federal troops were marching toward the territory. Here's where it gets weird. Only one man was tried and executed. 20 years later, documents disappeared. Witnesses stayed quiet. Brigham Young, the church leader and the territory's governor, was never formally investigated. Coincidence or deliberate protection? Number 6. Aurora, Texas, April 1897. Something strange streaked across the sky and crashed into a windmill on Judge Proctor's farm. Locals ran to the spot and found metal wreckage nobody could identify. But what left everyone speechless was something else. A small body, unlike any human being they'd ever seen. The pilot, as they called it, was buried in the local cemetery with a simple ceremony. Newspapers at the time ran the story, but the case was soon forgotten. Decades later, researchers tried to exhume the body, but the town refused permission. The unmarked grave is still there, marked only by an ordinary stone. The question nobody answers to this day: what exactly fell that morning, and who is buried in that corner of the cemetery? Number 7. New Mexico, 1860s. A man named Adams was working as a guide when Apache Indians led him to a hidden canyon. What he saw there changed his life forever. Gold nuggets the size of walnuts scattered across the bed of a stream. Adams memorized the route and left to go get help. But when he came back, he couldn't find the place at all. The desert had swallowed that canyon like it had never existed. Since then, more than 100 expeditions have tried to find that treasure. Most came back empty-handed. Some never came back. Experienced hunters died of thirst out in that desert, swearing they'd seen the canyon shining on the horizon. To this day, nobody knows if Adams made it all up or if there really is a fortune in gold buried somewhere in New Mexico waiting to be found. Number 8. The body nobody saw. November 1908, Bolivia. Soldiers surround 2 American bandits in a remote little town. Gunfight, silence. When they go in, they find 2 bodies. Case closed, right? Well, not really. No photos were taken, no official autopsy. The bodies were buried in a shallow, unmarked grave. Years later, Butch Cassidy's sister swore he showed up alive at the family ranch in Utah during the 1920s. She wasn't alone. Other relatives confirmed visits from the supposedly dead man. In 1991, researchers exhumed remains in Bolivia, hoping to settle it once and for all. The DNA test, inconclusive. It didn't match the Cassidy family, so who the hell was buried there? Some historians believe Butch quietly came back to the United States, lived as a farmer in Washington state, and died of old age in 1937. The truth? Buried right along with whoever's in that Bolivian grave. Number 9. The Ghosts of the Lincoln County War. New Mexico, 1878. The Lincoln County War was one of the bloodiest feuds in the Old West. On one side, big merchants. On the other, ranchers and gunmen like Billy the Kid. In just a few months, dozens died in ambushes and summary executions. But what happened afterward is what nobody can explain. Families who moved into the abandoned ranches started reporting strange things. Voices with no source echoing at night. Headless figures crossing through corrals. Some residents just dropped everything and left, abandoning their belongings. Records from the time show that at least 4 properties were abandoned in less than 2 years. The previous owners? All of them had died during the conflict. Coincidence? Or something history didn't manage to record properly? To this day, descendants of families in the area avoid talking about it. Number 10. Deadwood, South Dakota, August 1876. Wild Bill Hickok was sitting with his back to the saloon door, something he never did. That day, his usual chair was taken. Minutes later, Jack McCall walked in, pressed a revolver to the back of Hickok's head, and pulled the trigger. The legendary gunman died holding 2 black aces and 2 8s, which became known as the dead man's hand. McCall was hanged months later. But here's where the story gets interesting. Was he just a vengeful drunk, or did someone pay him for the job? Documents from the time suggest powerful men in Deadwood wanted Hickok out of the way. Some historians believe miners and casino owners feared he'd become sheriff and clean up the town. McCall himself changed his story several times before he died. The truth went to the grave with him. Number 11. When the Civil War ended in 1865, the South was broke. But here's what doesn't make sense. The Confederate treasure just vanished. We're talking millions in gold and silver that were never found. Some historians believe Southern officials sent that gold out west, hidden in ordinary wagons, planning to fund a second war. The destination? Nobody knows for sure. Over the years, maps have surfaced promising the exact location. Men have spent fortunes chasing those clues. What did they find? Abandoned mines, empty holes, and in some cases, deadly traps left behind to protect the stash. To this day, treasure hunters comb through Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico looking for that lost gold. The question nobody's been able to answer for more than 150 years. Did the treasure really exist? Or was it the biggest lie the defeated South ever told? Number 12. The code Hitler could never crack. During World War II, the American military had a serious problem. The Japanese were decoding all their radio messages. So someone came up with an idea that changed everything. Recruit Navajo Indians from Arizona to create a code based on their language. It worked perfectly. The Japanese and Germans tried like hell and never managed to decode a single word. But here's where it gets interesting. Researchers studying Navajo history found something strange. For centuries before the war, the tribe's shamans had already used a secret version of the language in sacred rituals. It was forbidden to teach it to outsiders. Some historians believe European explorers tried to steal that knowledge in the 19th century, but completely failed. The question nobody answers is how a language created to speak with spirits ended up becoming the most efficient, secret weapon of modern war. Number 13. How many famous gunslingers were actually women in disguise? Here's something that'll make you rethink everything you know about the Old West. Military documents and hospital records reveal dozens of cases of soldiers and cowboys who were only discovered to be women when they got sick or died. Kathy Williams served a full 2 years in the Army before being found out in 1868. But she wasn't the only one. Historians estimate that hundreds of women lived whole lives as men on the American frontier. Some were escaping violent marriages. Others were chasing the freedom only men had back then. The question nobody can answer is simple. How many famous gunslingers we admire in history books were actually women who took their secret to the grave? Number 14. Bodie, California, once had 10,000 people and was one of the most violent towns in the Old West. When the gold ran out in the 1880s, the place became a ghost town overnight. But here's where things get strange. For decades, visitors who took souvenirs home, a nail, a coin, a piece of wood, started reporting serious accidents, unexplained illnesses, and even deaths in the family. The weirdest part, hundreds of those people mailed the objects back, along with letters apologizing to the spirits of Bodie. The park rangers keep those letters to this day. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you see piles of relics returned by desperate people trying to end their bad luck, it's hard to ignore. Bodie is still there, untouched, like time stopped, and apparently it doesn't like people messing with its stuff. Number 15. The mysterious illnesses on the reservations. New Mexico, 1880s. Whole tribes started getting sick for no clear reason. The symptoms didn't match any disease known at the time. Strange fevers, breathing problems, deaths that army doctors would simply write down as natural causes and move on. Here's where it gets interesting. Military documents from that period mention training exercises carried out near the reservations. But what kind of training makes people sick from miles away? Some researchers found records of chemical substances being shipped to forts in the region. The final destination was never clearly documented. Coincidence or not, the areas where those exercises happened were rich in mineral deposits the government wanted to tap. The deaths were never investigated. The survivors were relocated. And the original reports disappeared from official archives decades later. Number 16. Colorado, 1874. 6 men set out on a winter expedition. Only one came back. Alfred Packer showed up 2 months later, alone, well-fed, and with money in his pocket. The story he told? That he had to eat his companions to survive in the snow. Makes sense, right? Except there was a problem. When they found the bodies, all of them had stab marks in their skulls. They didn't die from cold or starvation. Someone killed those men. Packer changed his story multiple times over the years. First he said one companion went crazy and killed the others. Later he admitted he did it himself. The judge at the trial was so outraged, he delivered a line that went down in history. He said Packer had eaten 5 Democrats from the county. Was it extreme survival or a calculated plan from the start? To this day, nobody knows the answer. Number 17. Pat Garrett, the man who killed Billy the Kid, was found dead on a road in New Mexico in 1908. He was shot in the back. Rancher Wayne Brazel confessed to the crime, claiming self-defense. The jury acquitted him in less than 15 minutes. Something didn't add up. How does someone defend themselves by shooting another man in the back? Garrett had powerful enemies who wanted his land. Some researchers believe Brazel was just the fall guy. But the story gets even stranger. For decades, rumors have circulated that Billy the Kid didn't die in 1881. People said Garrett staged the outlaw's death and that the two had a secret deal. Did someone want to silence Garrett before he spilled the truth? The case was never officially reopened. Number 18. California, 1850s. The gold rush brought thousands of men into the Sierra Nevada mountains. And along with the gold came stories nobody can explain to this day. Miners started reporting run-ins with huge, hairy creatures, beings that walked on 2 legs and stole food from camps at night. The accounts were consistent: over 7 feet tall, a horrible smell, superhuman strength. Now here's the detail that complicates everything. Those miners worked with mercury to separate the gold. Mercury poisoning can cause severe hallucinations and paranoia. But there's a problem with that explanation. Local native tribes were talking about these creatures long before white settlers showed up. They called them different names, but the description was basically identical. So were they collective hallucinations? Or did the miners run into something the natives had known about for centuries? Number 19. The settlers who just disappeared. In 1800s New Mexico, something strange happened so often nobody could explain it. Whole groups of settlers just vanished into the desert without a trace. We're talking families, wagons, animals. Everything evaporated like it had never existed. The detail that still gives people chills is that on some rocks near the abandoned camps, they found the word CROATOAN carved into the stone. The same mysterious term from the lost Roanoke colony on the East Coast 200 years earlier. Coincidence? Hard to swallow. Theories at the time ranged from attacks by hostile tribes to something darker, cannibalism among the settlers themselves, driven by desperation. But no explanation really added up. Where were the bodies, the burned wagons, the signs of a fight? The New Mexico desert kept that secret, and to this day, nobody knows what really happened to those people. Number 20. The Lights of Tombstone, Arizona, 1880s. Wyatt Earp and other residents of Tombstone reported something strange in the desert skies. They weren't ordinary stars. They were lights that moved, changed direction, and vanished without explanation. The reports show up in local newspapers from the time. Witnesses described bright objects crossing the night sky in patterns meteors just don't make. Some said the lights would stop in midair before disappearing. What's interesting is the context. Tombstone was living through violent days, with frequent shootouts and constant tension. Skeptics argue that collective stress caused people to see things. But why would so many different people describe the same thing? The records exist. The witnesses were practical men of the Old West, not the type to make stuff up. And to this day, no one has been able to definitively explain what those people saw in the skies over Arizona more than 140 years ago. Number 21. In Arizona's Superstition Mountains, there's a legend that has already led more than 600 people to their deaths. The Lost Dutchman mine, as it became known, was supposedly a gold mine discovered by a German immigrant named Jacob Waltz in the 1870s. He died in 1891, taking the secret location to the grave. The problem is what came next. Treasure hunters started turning up dead, under circumstances nobody can explain. Some were found decapitated, others simply vanished without a trace. The Apache always warned that those mountains were sacred territory and that spirits protected the gold. Coincidence or not, people who ignore the warning usually don't come back. To this day, people keep hiking those trails looking for the fortune. And to this day, bodies keep showing up. The mine has never been officially found. Number 22. Belle Starr was riding alone on a road in Oklahoma in February 1889 when someone shot her in the back. The shots hit her face and back. She fell off her horse and still tried to get up, but she was shot again. She died right there, 2 days before her 41st birthday. The sheriff investigated and found 2 main suspects: her own son, Ed Reed, and a neighbor named Edgar Watson. Ed had gotten into a huge fight with his mother days earlier. Witnesses heard her threaten to turn him in for horse theft. Watson also had a motive because Belle discovered he was wanted in Florida for murder. But nobody was arrested. Rumors at the time said Belle was pregnant and that the father was her own son. True or not, nobody ever proved anything. The case was shelved, and to this day, remains unsolved. Number 23, the desert's ghost colony, New Mexico, 1880s. An entire settlement of settlers just vanished without a trace. We're talking whole families, wagons, animals. Everything evaporated in the desert's dry air. The only clue? The word CROATOAN carved into rocks near the site. The same mysterious term found centuries earlier on the East Coast when the Roanoke colony disappeared. Coincidence? Hard to swallow. Theories at the time were all over the place. Some pointed to conflicts with local tribes. Others talked about massacres over gold in the area. Some people even mentioned strange cults operating in that isolated territory. Years later, prospectors found human bones scattered in a remote area. None were identified. Territorial authorities filed the case away without any real investigation. What happened to those people? Why would someone carve the exact same word from a colonial mystery 300 years earlier? To this day, nobody knows.